Hello and welcome everyone to this November session of the AdSense on Air series. My name is Vincent.
And my name is Fatih.
And we're going to be with you live for the next hour approximately to talk to you about HTTPS migrations. So we both work in a Google department which is called Trust and Safety. We're not part of the AdSense team, but we're going to talk to you today about HTTPS as it relates to AdSense publishers. But we are not from that team ourselves. So Trust and Safety, what does Trust and Safety do? We protect Google users, basically. We look at all the trends of abuse. We find the bad guys that use Google products in an abusive way, and then we make sure that our products are free of abuse. And one of the technologies that are used for that is HTTPS, right? So this is why we are talking to you today. All right, so I think we'll get started. We plan on talking about 40 minutes, something like this, and there is time for the end at the end for questions. I usually work on the French market. Fatih, you're on the...
Yeah, I'm also working for the Turkish market. Yeah, and we work on a lot of user safety and security issues across different markets as well.
But today we're talking to everyone.
Yeah,
internationally. Let's hope English is fine. This is the November issue of the AdSense on Air set of events that are organized by Google every month. So here are important links for you to remember. g.co/AdSense on Air to register to these sessions to be able to watch them live. And then g.co/AdSense question to be able to ask live questions during the event and before the event. So this forum is now open and you can go ahead and ask your questions, and we'll try to get to them by the end of the session today if they are on topic, and we can actually help you with an answer for these questions. It's also important to give us your opinion on what you thought of this event today, on the content, the presenters, the series in general, the format. And therefore, after this live stream, we'll send you a feedback survey for you to fill out so that we have data about whether the session was appreciated by everyone. That communication should also include some of the sources, resources, documentation that we're going to talk about today. So I highly recommend that you follow up with that tomorrow. Right, so here's the agenda for today. We're going to go over the high level why HTTPS, what is it, and why is it important today. Then we will go through a session, know before you go. So a few high-level questions as well and concerns that some people have before going into an HTTPS migration. And then we'll actually look at how we do that thing, what steps are important when you do your HTTPS migration. So I'll hand over to Fatih, who will talk, first of all, about HTTPS, what it is, and why is it important.
Thank you, Vincent. So yeah, let's get started. So I'm sure most of you noticed that there are a lot of websites that are transitioning to HTTPS, or at least they're talking about their plans to move into HTTPS, right? And you might be wondering why this is important, and most importantly, why you should care this as a publisher, right? The answer is actually very simple. It all comes down to security. So if we go into the details of what is HTTPS, HTTPS is basically a secure connection between your website and your users, right? It's basically like an encryption method, so that whatever information is being transmitted, it cannot be read by the third parties, right? So it's a secure way of transmitting information, and the difference from the other regular HTTP is that the regular HTTP is an open protocol. So whatever information you're exchanging is actually visible. So it's right now in a deprecation path. So the majority of the website you see on the web is actually using HTTPS, right? So what is the big deal, right? Why should you care? So in the upcoming slides, we will basically focus on three things to keep that in mind. And the first one is what we call like enablers, right? Nowadays, a lot of advanced web features that are supported by very well-known browsers are have the other prerequisite of having the HTTPS, right? Because those features are so powerful. And using them with like a standard HTTP protocol will put your users and your website at great risk, right? So what are these features? I'm sure you're familiar with some of these. Well, with the modern browsers, you can actually use a lot of device-specific functions, such as you can request the location information of the user using the geolocation API. You can actually autofill forms for passwords, email addresses, and you can actually request access to the device's camera using the web browser. Right? These are all powerful features, but they all interact with the sensitive private user information. And on top of that, we have new technologies coming. So for example, the progressive web apps, right? So we call them PWA in short. They're basically trying to bring the most powerful features of native applications, and they try to merge it with the all benefits of the open web, right? So in order to have a progressive web app, you need HTTPS, because those applications again handle with a lot of private user data. Likewise, if you want to send push notifications to your users, or if you want to use advanced caching features such as service workers and all that different features, again, HTTPS is prerequisite, right? And the last one is that it's a little bit new, but you will be hearing more of these concepts, such as physical web Bluetooth, web USB. These are all features that helps you to interact with the physical world without actually using a mobile application, right? So whenever you go to a bus stop, or whenever you pass through a billboard, your device can interact with the physical world smoothly. But since, again, this interaction involves a lot of private user information, such as location, the login informations, again, HTTPS is required, right? In order to open up all these possibilities, we highly recommend leveraging HTTPS. The other one is how do we look at HTTPS within the Google, as specifically within the scope of Google search, right? I think it's been more than 4 years, right? So the Google search officially announced that we are now taking HTTPS as a positive ranking signal, right? And this means that if you're benefiting from HTTPS on your website, this will have positive performance implications on your organic search performance. Just to keep that in mind, we have more than 200 search signals that we use in order to understand a website's quality and its relevance to user queries, and HTTP is one of them. All right, so the quality and relevance, they're still very important factors.
At this stage, I think also it's important to add on top of what Fatih just said, that it's not just Google. Many other technology providers are also favoring HTTPS over HTTP protocol. WordPress, if you're using a WordPress site, WordPress as your CMS for your site, essentially some features will not be available to you if you're not serving your content over HTTPS. And that's just one example, many other providers. So
that's correct.
Important for Google and for other providers as well.
Majority of the CMS providers are also supporting that one. And one last thing regarding this one, also Google is transitioning all of its services to HTTPS. As we're speaking, I think almost all of the other Google services and the Google-related traffic is flowing through HTTPS. So it's good. That's a lot of traffic. The second important point is the protection, right? So the most important feature of HTTPS is it protects you as a website owner as well as your users. But what are the details, right? How it is being done. So in terms of web security, HTTPS provide you three important features. The first one is authentication. And with HTTPS, you actually make sure that you're talking to the person who they claim to be, right? So if you're visiting google.com and if you're doing this on an HTTPS protocol, you're actually making sure that this is the actual Google, not someone else trying to mimic the Google's website with good or bad intentions, right? So this is the first benefit. The second one is what we call data integrity, right? So whenever you're visiting a website, you're exchanging data both ways. You're getting something from the website itself, and also you're sending some information in the other direction, right? So with HTTPS, any third party, it could be an internet service provider, it could be the restaurant that you're connecting to the internet, it could be like an airport public internet connection. No one else can intercept this data transfer, right? So you're basically making sure that it is all intact. The last benefit of the HTTPS is what we call encryption. And again, so since this data transfer is encrypted, even though people can access to this data, since it is encrypted, it will be meaningless. So it will be totally protected and unified for your personal use. We'll share with you like a couple of security risks that are coming from not using HTTPS, right? So one of the most common problems that we see is what we call man-in-the-middle attacks, right? So here in the screenshots, you're seeing a couple of examples. So the most common way the bad actors are abusing this, they basically inject content and advertisements into your website. And this can damage your brand. You might be losing your ad revenue, but most importantly, you are actually putting your users at risk because, first of all, your users might be exposing certain like bad softwares, malwares, some like not secure downloads, right? So if you're not controlling what information is being transferred from your website to your users, I'm sure somebody else will control that. So just keep that in mind. The second one is what we call eavesdropping. Again, a couple of like common misuses of not using the HTTPS is what we call perma cookies, right? So basically, again, it could be done with like internet service providers or like some certain advertisers, but they're basically injecting like a certain unique identifier to your cookies so that they can track your users without their consent, right? So this is the one of the most common ways of like abusing HTTP websites. The other one is they might be collecting your users' behaviors, such as their like passwords, their personal information, and such, right? So again, eavesdropping is another threat that we see a lot nowadays on the web. So the third important point is planning, right? Vincent will talk about the planning part more, but I'll just share with you like a couple of highlights. As I said previously, HTTPS on a like a deprecation path, right? And for example,
HTTP
is on a like a deprecation path right now, and most of the traffic you see on the web is already HTTPS, and this is being supported by a lot of very well-known browsers, including Chrome, Mozilla, Safari, and as such, right? And there was like a couple of like big announcements from different like browsers in the past, where they share their plan on how they're gonna deprecate the HTTP, right? So nowadays we are in the very latest stages of this deprecation. So right now, if you visit a HTTP site on your browser, you might be seeing these red warnings that are warning you, saying that this site is not secure. And this is already happening in Chrome, and I'm sure that it's also happening in other reputable browsers as well, right? This
is to make you realize that HTTPS is really to be prioritized over something that's going to be deprecated. I think the reason they do this as well, for if you've followed up as well, Adobe has said that they will deprecate Flash at some point, and I'm pretty sure when that happens, you will have so many people that will come up and wonder why their website is broken. Although they shouldn't really be using Flash anymore, but that's going to come. So these are made so that this doesn't happen, right? These sort of
just take this as a heads up, both for yourself as a content owner, also it's a heads up for your users as well, so that they might be ready for what's coming next. So yeah, these are a couple of examples from like a mobile browser, but you might be seeing the similar versions of this in your desktop browser as well, right? And again, specifically for Chrome, the Google started marking HTTP pages as not secure as of September the 18th, right? So it's pretty recent, but I'm seeing like it is actually accelerating the migration to HTTPS, and I hope you're not seeing this on your website. If you see in the upcoming slides, Vincent will share with you like great tips on how you can migrate, right? So these are just a couple of well-known, like publicly visible websites who has recently transitioned to HTTPS. So I would suggest just like looking them up and benefit from their learnings along the way, right? Just like a couple of big publishers. And then I would like to share with you some data points around HTTPS adoption. We are publishing a transparency report on Chrome security blog, and here you can see the numbers of HTTPS traffic in Chrome browsers, right? And we started tracking this data almost 4 years ago, right? So if you look at it in the middle of like 2015, the HTTPS adoption was less than 50%, right? Even for some countries, it was less than 25%. So we came a very long way, right? If you look at the data now, so I pulled this data for you on the other right-hand side, it is close to 90%, right? This is very promising. So I'm hoping that by like when we reach the 2019, we will see numbers like higher than 90%.
I just want to say that France is beating Turkey, but that's just in passing.
Yeah, we are catching up. We are catching up. But yeah, I'll suggest you to take a look at these numbers. Just to summarize, HTTPS provides you 3 important benefits, right? Again, you can only benefit from powerful web features such as location API, the notifications, and accessing users' devices like hardware capabilities such as like cameras, USB ports, and Bluetooth. HTTPS is a requirement, right? And the second one is HTTPS is a security protocol, right? So it protects your website, your brand image, as well as your users, right? And the last one is HTTPS sometimes is a big change, and it requires planning and prioritization, right? So if you haven't done it yet, just please start like getting yourself familiarized with the concepts, and just pay attention to what Vincent will be sharing in the upcoming slides, because it's starting.
So much pressure.
And yeah, so right now Vincent will talk you about the things that you need to keep in mind before you actually go through like a HTTPS migration, right? But Vincent, I heard that HTTPS certificates are costing so much money. Is that true?
So it doesn't have to be true. Thank you for the question, by the way, Fatih. Not rehearsed at all. It doesn't have to be at all. I'll try to control my voice speed as well so that I don't run through this. So there are solutions to not even pay for an HTTPS, an SSL certificate that enables you to use HTTPS protocol for your sites. AdSense script is one example, but I think there's a couple others, and there's also very lowly priced subscriptions or products that exist. Let's Encrypt is an open organization that is financed, sponsored, and receiving donations basically by most of the major technology providers in the world. Google through Chrome is one, but so is Mozilla and Firefox. So are a lot of the hosting providers. So it's this massive platform that is actually enabling people to get free certificates. They, I think, also do paid, but most importantly, that's their promise. Really, it's securing the web for free. They also do something that is automation of renewals and automation of some of the configurations associated with SSL certificates. So it's a really comprehensive solution to get the protocol running. So I can't really see a valid reason being it costs me too much money to go HTTPS for not going HTTPS.
As a side note, I use actually Let's Encrypt for my own personal website, for my personal blog, and it took me less than 15 minutes to set up the HTTPS. It's free and it's like super fast.
Cool. All right, then another question or point that we hear a lot when we try to tell people to go to HTTPS. One concern that always comes is, but switching to HTTPS will destroy my SEO. It's actually one of the questions that has been asked through the link that we shared at the beginning, g.co/AdSense question. So to this, to look at the impact on SEO, HTTPS itself will not really have an impact on SEO. Like, it will not destroy your SEO will not be destroyed on your website just because you go to HTTPS. However, to be noted, an HTTPS migration is just like any other migration. So it means that you are changing the way that Google and other search engines understand your website, because you're essentially giving them a new path, a new URL to access the content, right? So if you don't do things properly, you can probably have a little bit of a rocky SEO transition, if you will. So it's a long-term endeavor. It's something that you plan ahead. It's something that you then do properly, following the resources that we're going to share after. And it's something that you then keep controlling over time. The HTTPS migration is not done the moment you click enable in your hosting provider console or whatever it is. So it's a long-term project. You can't just be done with it in an hour. It's quick to do, but it takes some preparation to do, especially if your site is not small, let's say. And so the impact on SEO, actually small positive signal for Google organic search. So when two documents that could answer users' questions have approximately the same level of quality, and one of them is served over the HTTP protocol and the other one over the HTTPS protocol, that second one that is secure for users might actually receive a little bit of a push that will make it go just over the line. So it's, as Fatih said, there's many factors involved in organic search ranking, but the fact that your site is served over HTTPS is actually a small one of those factors. So why not use it, right? Always wondering what is the secret sauce. That's one ingredient.
Check the box.
All right. Then another of the complaints we hear, or the fears of a lot of people before going to HTTPS is, wait, mixed content is such a headache to manage. How do I do this? So first off, what is mixed content?
I love this slide.
You love this slide?
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting one. So what is mixed content? This is, if you look at the slide right there, you have basically your site. Let's say, Fatih, this is your blog, right? You have a logo. Your blog is about fly fishing in Alaska, right? I think that was the topic last time. So you have your blog. The logo is a nice fish. I'm not sure what fish you find in Alaska this time of the year.
It's probably frozen.
It's you have a frozen rectangular fish at the top left of your site. Then you have a menu where you can see autumn fish, whatever, season fish, Alaska, etc. And then the search bar, and then this is an article, right? So you have your content itself, what you wrote when you went on your last fly fishing trip in Alaska, and that's it. That's your website. Not exactly, right? Because you probably have an ad using your favorite ad publishing system, obviously. You might have comments at the bottom, probably on Disqus or Facebook, or maybe on G+. That's up to you. You might have a video of your latest trip. You might have, and that you're hosting on a platform like YouTube, Vimeo, or whatever other platform. You might have another ad segment. You might have some images that highlight the material you're using, that highlight anything, and again, that you're hosting on your site or hosting somewhere else. You might have a cookie consent, which is loaded through. There's a little nifty tools that enable you to take some code, put it on your website, and then don't worry about the cookie notification more than that. You might have a newsletter pop-up that comes over and take the whole area. By the way, I hate this, but I just made it big to highlight that. It's very annoying. That's my own personal agenda today. And then you have also some analytics and tracking codes that are loaded in the background that can be served coming from another service provider. You can have some JavaScript features. You can have, like, the list goes on and on. You can have so much content on your website that comes from third parties. So you don't control that content. You just integrate it from someone else who gave it to you. And you have a problem with mixed content if your page is served over HTTPS, but the content that was given to you by those third parties is served over HTTP protocol, right? Because then you're asking the browser to verify that all communications happening on your blog is secure and encrypted, when actually it isn't, because there are some resources that are loaded in a non-encrypted way. So that's when mixed content happens. When you mix all of those, when you use all of those, that code coming from third parties, you have less control. It's more convenient because you don't have to be to know how to create a comment section. You don't have to be an expert in video hosting and bandwidth management and compression and all of that, right? You leave that to a platform, they know what you're doing, and you just easily take it. So very convenient, but much less control. So the main point of this slide is that there is some due diligence to do these days. It's not as strong as before because most third-party providers now are serving their content over HTTPS, which was far from the case a few years ago. But there's still some due diligence to do. So whenever you work with a third party in terms of code anywhere on your website, you need to check that they are actually serving their HTTPS, their content over HTTPS.
So in other words, can we say that like you're only stronger as the weakest link on your website, right?
More or less, yeah. You can have every single feature that is HTTPS and then one that is not, and then your site can be seen as having mixed content. That's a good way to put it. All right, fourth question, and this one came a lot through the questions that were sent over before this presentation. But wait, my ad revenue will get destroyed. So we're not ad professionals ourselves. We're more on the security side of things. But basically, the main thing to remember these days is that the ad ecosystem is mostly ready. 4 years ago, in 2014, you already had 80% of the International Advertising Bureau members who were ready, who were making their content available over HTTPS. So that was 4 years ago. I can't really even imagine that this number would be lower, and it's probably, I don't have the really latest data, but I don't imagine it to be very far from 100, if it's even under 100. Being a member of the International Advertising Bureau means that you're respecting international standards of quality, of transparency, of security, of just being a good citizen in the ad ecosystem. So I would personally recommend, when you choose an ad system, to actually choose one that is a member of the IAB or that is involved in any way in making sure the ad ecosystem is safe. Now, another thing that is often talked about, here I am running again. Wow, I'm going faster than my own thoughts. One other thing that kept coming up a few years ago was the pressure. Is there a pressure on ad auctions, right? So the way that AdSense works, and very basic, is you always have bidding. You have an auction for several advertisers that want to appear in certain spaces on publishers' websites. And then there's an automated auction, and then the winner of the auction gets there. And at the very beginning of implementing HTTPS for the AdSense catalog of ads, there were very few. Like the first day it launched, there were probably a few, if any, ads served over HTTPS, which meant that there was almost no one bidding. None of the advertisers were bidding for being placed on the publisher's website, and therefore the prices paid to publishers were very low, right? Because there was no competition there. That was true at the beginning, but is today more or less a myth. This is a bit of a controversial term, but I think it really highlights that it's just not true anymore. There might be other things causing you to have a problem with ads. Maybe it's a bad configuration of your AdSense account in relation to HTTPS, or of your general HTTPS website, which means that the bots cannot crawl it. It can be several things, right? But if you do your HTTPS transition migration properly, the fact that your HTTPS does not impact your revenue. One thing of note is that all of ad tracking codes everywhere should also be served over HTTPS. Otherwise, you might also have problems in the reporting of what's happening on your website. So that's important to remember. Right. And now this is the fifth and final regular complaints that we hear about HTTPS. HTTPS is so slow, right? Well, here the answer is the same as for HTTPS is expensive. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be slow. So there's this website that I recommend going to, which is pretty technical. And full disclosure, it was written by a Google colleague. But I think it's very interesting because it really highlights that, no, HTTPS, the technology itself, is not slow. If it's poorly implemented, your site might be slow. But that might also be related to the general server-side configuration of your website. So HTTPS in itself, well put through, isn't really slow. Even if your site is slow and you think it's because of HTTPS or whatever it is, I'm pretty sure that in 95% of the cases, HTTPS is far from being the main factor that contributes to your website being slow. Fatih, how big is your logo of the Flyfish blog?
16 megabytes?
16 megabytes, right? And you have to load it every single time that you're on your mobile network.
Is it too big?
On your 4G, yeah. So image compression, many other performance problems are so much bigger. If you're really concerned about speed, HTTPS should not be where you start. You should start with tools that will let you know where to optimize. You can use Google tool like Google Lighthouse or web.dev, the Chrome Developer Console. There are many external tools from other providers as well, the Firefox Dev Console. Really, speed is an issue today online, but HTTPS is not the main factor, far from it in reality. Right, so HTTPS is free. It doesn't have an impact on ad revenue. It's not slow. It's perfect, right? So let's do this. We go in and we flip a switch, right? That's how we do it.
I hope that was that easy.
Yeah. So as we said earlier, the migration, the HTTPS migration is just an SEO migration or a change of URLs. That's what we call site moves with URL changes in the documentation. It's quite extensive. So again, we'll send the resources that are relevant to this session today, probably tomorrow, with everyone who is watching this. So you will be able to go to this Help Center article, series of Help Center articles that go over what needs to be done. but it would take quite a while to go very, very in-depth today with that during the session. So we're just going to have a high-level overview, highlighting the main points, and then sure, be welcome. I think you should all, everyone who is thinking about going into the migration should spend some time to read extensively the documentation and become familiar with everything. So we're going to go through 4 steps. The first one is to prepare the new site. I say new site, it's the same site, right? It's your website, but for search engines, and in this context we're talking about here, let's think of them as 2 different sites. The site served over HTTP protocol and the site served over the HTTPS protocol. So the new site, the HTTPS one, needs to be properly configured. The robots.txt, which is a file that is uploaded to the root of the domain, should not prevent any crawler from accessing resources that are important to access. When you do the migration, Google crawlers, other search engine crawlers, etc., will start when they go to the new websites, to the HTTPS pages. They will first go to that robots.txt. That's the first step, and they look at what they're allowed to go explore and what they're not allowed to. So this is a massive mistake we see all the time. Make sure that this is set up properly on the new domain as well as on the old domain site. You need to create a Search Console account for the new domain, for the HTTPS site. Unfortunately, currently, the Search Console has to be verified. So first off, Search Console is the suite of tools used by Google to give information to webmasters about their website in organic search in general. So you register your websites to, you verify your website to this tool, and then you have a lot of information. How many pages are indexed, how many are being shown to users, how many get clicks, for what keywords, are there errors, security, mobile friendliness, usability. There's everything in there. So you need to make sure that you create it for the HTTPS URLs as well as for the HTTP. And then any settings that exist within this Search Console set of tools, like URL parameters or geo-targeting, need to also be set up ahead of time in the new Search Console, in Search Console for the HTTPS pages. So that's the whole preparation for the migration. Then the second thing you do is prepare a URL mapping. You're going to have documents that exist in the HTTP site that are now going to be on the HTTPS site. And this is the one document, the HTTPS one, that you want both your users and Googlebot, the Google crawlers, to explore, to go to. This is becoming your main page. This is the one that should be indexed. This is the one that navigates to there. So you're going to have to prepare 301 server redirects. Those are server-side redirects. They're configured on the side of your server. Basically, it's done automatically. Depends on your server architecture. There's several ways to set it up. And you have to prepare them ahead of time. You have to make sure that you know what's going to happen. You need to create a sitemap file for the new HTTPS site. A sitemap file is same thing as the robots.txt. It's usually a .txt or a .xml file that you upload to the root of your site again, and you indicate, you basically list all of the URLs that you want Googlebot to explore and other bots as well to explore on your site. And therefore, you need to make sure that when you're going to do the migration, all of the new pages on the HTTPS website are listed in the sitemap. That will accelerate the search engine's understanding of the migration. Finally, you need to update internal links if you're using relative links, so without using the domain. So let's say fatisblog.com/Alaska. If you're using a link to internally to your website /Alaska, no need to change. However, if you are using fatisdomain.com, fatisblog.com/Alaska, you need to make sure that now the internal link includes the HTTPS protocol, so that there's less redirect chains whenever robots or humans explore anything. on your website. So you have a list of, ultimately it boils down to a list of former or old documents on your website, the list of new documents on your website, and how you're going to send users and robots from the old to the new. If there are pages that you're not going to be transitioning over, migrating over to the HTTPS site, you can just choose to put to give a 404 server response. That means page is gone. That's a server error. And then search engines will understand that the document doesn't exist anymore. So then you start the site move. Do you do it all at once or in sections? You can do both. We're going to go over that in one of the next slides. So you activate redirects. So that's actually everyone, users and crawling bots, will be redirected to the new HTTPS site. And you update incoming links as much as you can. If it's coming from other domains that you control, that you have control over, other websites, then you modify the link yourself so that they are HTTPS links to the HTTPS page. If they are coming from other websites, you can spend a bit of time asking owners of those other websites to update the links. But to be honest, that's not a major priority. If you don't have time to do that, that's not the end of the world. The important part is that the redirects are really activated and they're not showing any mistakes, any errors. Once you start the site move, one important caveat is that you need to make sure you have the server bandwidth. This might, when Google bots and other search engine bots start seeing those 301 redirects and start seeing that all of the traffic to the old HTTP protocol is now asked to go to the HTTPS protocol website, the crawlers might get excited and try to crawl everything in the new domain to try to understand what's going on, and it might take a little bit of a toll on your server. So you need to make sure that you have that bandwidth available. And finally, monitor traffic, right? You need to make sure that Search Console is set up properly for both versions, HTTP and HTTPS, and that you monitor on this. And you also, as I just said, need to make sure your error logs or your logs on your server show the 301s and everything is going well. I think, Fatih, you had a good thing on this Search Console.
The typical behavior that you will see in your Search Console is that when you look at the number of HTTP URLs in your site, once you make the switch, they will start converging to zero over the time. And on the other hand,
many are indexed. Right?
Yes, and we will have less and less HTTP URLs coming from your domain. On the other hand, if you look at your number of HTTP URLs indexed in Google search, that number will obviously start from zero and will increase over time. And eventually that number will pick up from where you left off with your number of HTTP URLs. So the length of this transition depends on your site, depends on how fast and how frequent Googlebot is crawling your website, but it should be taking from a couple of days to a couple of weeks, actually.
Yeah, for large websites, it can even be much longer, depending on a lot of factors.
If you have millions of URLs, yes.
Usually it's these perfectly inversed lines.
It goes like this.
Transitioning from one bucket into another.
Exactly.
And at the end, they have the same value.
And regarding to that slide, I mean, not having properly set up the 301 redirects is the most common error that we have observed during these HTTP transitions. The most important thing that if you don't set up your redirects properly, you will be basically publishing two versions of your website that has the same content. So it is both available from HTTP and both available from HTTPS. Obviously, this is confusing both for your users as well as for search engines and other crawlers. Just make sure that these redirects happen properly so that your users that are using your HTTP URL still go to the HTTPS version. Likewise, it is valid for the crawlers and search engines.
Yeah. And anyone that's ever posted a link on social media to your HTTP page or someone has bookmarked your HTTP page as well. If you don't have those redirections and at some point you drop the HTTP version and it doesn't serve any content anymore, well, that's lost viewers for you. That's lost traffic. So it's really important to put it in place and then to keep it for a long time in most cases. So we're going to go through a few frequently asked questions, and these cover already a lot of the questions that came in through the link that is used to ask questions for these AdSense on Air series. So let's jump right into it. So we brushed on this before. Is it okay to move just some pages to HTTPS? Well, the answer is yes, right? If you want to move just your main page, you can. But there's two issues there. The first one is that then for all the rest of your pages, your users are not secure. They're not browsing your site safely. And the second reason is that you might just break everything. As we looked into, there's a lot of little things to set up, the sitemaps, the internal linking. You can actually do things. You can mess up a bit, and sometimes that can have negative effects on your browsers, your traffic, your visitors, but also on your SEO, for example. So you should avoid it, in my opinion, unless you manage a large website. Transitioning everything at once. When I say large, we're talking millions, tens of millions of pages, really very, very large websites. You can then have a reason to do it. The main reason would be testing, right? If you want to test first on one specific subsection of your site, monitor the traffic, see that it's going well. And then once you're happy, you push a little bit of a larger section, and then a large, and then eventually the whole thing. That can be a good way to do it. But this will require a lot of time and someone who has dedicated time over several weeks or months to spend just on the HTTPS migration. So that's really not the case of most website editors, publishers.
Yeah, for larger websites, it totally makes sense to prioritize certain sections of your website over the others that are most user critical, login information that contains all these sensitive informations. But again, I don't see any practical reason why you should left apart any part of your site on HTTP, right? Eventually, everything can be moved to HTTPS, and it is easier to maintain.
Yeah, you're setting yourself for a headache when you have to remember which part which part isn't, etc. That can be interesting. All right, second question is, what kind of certificate should I get? And that is a very broad question. So the certificates are delivered by certificate authorities. Those are organizations that are vetted to deliver strong, certain strength of encryption technology to the protocol that you use. There's no preference in which certificate authority you use. If you get an SSL certificate from an authority, it will be considered HTTPS if you set it up properly. So there's no authority that is better than the other in terms of, yes, it is encrypted, or no, it is not. However, there's a couple of things to take into account. The encryption uses an encryption key, and we recommend to use 2048 bits encryption key. This is much stronger than the just lower version of 1024, and it's really just recommended in terms of strength of the signal, of how much how hard it would be to brute force through the encryption. But we're really talking here about hypotheticals. Just going for that level of security would probably be, of encryption would probably be the best idea. And then there's different types of certificates you can get. You can get a single host, for example, example.com or fatisfishingblog.com. or .tr
Phishing,
actually.
as in like
Oh,
the animal, right?
yeah, of course.
Not the
malicious
the
behavior
malicious
online.
phishing banking.
.tr actually for Turkey. So this would cover a single host certificate would cover all the pages on example.com or www.example.com, and that's completely fine to use if you have just a very simple website with all the pages hosted under example.com. Then you can use a multi-domain certificate. A multi-domain certificate will cover pages under example.com, under all the subdomains, images.example.com, videos.example.com, whichever it is. And you can also include just other names of multi-domains, right? So here, this enables you to make sure that you transition all of the parts of your website. And to be noted that you have to list in the multi-domain certificate, you have to explicitly list which subdomains and which domains you want to be covered. If you want all the subdomains of your domain to be covered, then you can go for a wildcard certificate, which is anything under example.com. The difference with above is that above you have to explicitly write images.examples.com, to cover it with this.
This gives you more flexibility
and
peace of mind most of the time.
Most websites would be fine with the multi-domain approach, even the single domain, single host for very simple websites. Right. So does this migration have an impact on Google News? Yes, it can if you are using a news sitemap. So I'm not a news expert, but that's what I've been reading. Basically, if you're using a news sitemap to submit your content to Google News, you need to make sure that the sitemap that you are sending over is actually HTTPS as well, if your content is being served over HTTPS now. And also, you need to make sure to let the Google News team know. So there is a form to fill out when you do this, and we'll include it in the documentation that we'll send just after this.
It is under the partner dashboard, publisher dashboard.
Yeah, as well.
Yeah. It's a very simple change.
So that was a question that came up a couple of times. And then last question that is a little bit technical: should I use HSTS? So what is HSTS? First, it's HTTP Strict Transfer Security. What it does is that it forces your browser to request directly the HTTPS page. Let's say, again, I bookmarked Fatih's blog at some point when it was still HTTP. And therefore, when I click on the bookmark, the browser takes the URL that is bookmarked and tries to load it. If it's an HTTP protocol and your server uses HSTS, then it will force the browser to request directly the HTTPS page. So you will just save a little bit of time, and it's just direct connection to the HTTPS version. And the answer is absolutely yes. We recommend that you use it. It's not necessary for your sites to be seen as served over strong encryption, but it's just an additional little help to browsers to manage security in the proper way. Right. So I rambled on for enough time. So we can probably, well, first of all, thank you for staying with us for 50 minutes. And we'll take a few of the questions that have been sent. And this time it's my turn to ask Fatih questions.
Great. So just to remind you, yeah. So here is the link, g.co/AdSense questions. If you haven't posted it yet, feel free to go and post your questions. Do we already have some questions coming?
We already have plenty of questions, as well as people telling us what the weather is like where they live. It's always a little bit of a mixed bag. The first question is from Sheiko, which is saying, how would I migrate HTTP to HTTPS using GoDaddy hosting?
Okay. So GoDaddy is one of the most known domain service providers. Obviously, we are not very well equipped with the details of HTTPS transition specific for GoDaddy. I'm sure they have extensive support articles for that. But whatever information we just shared with you is not specific to any domain service provider. It's not specific to any CMS provider. It is just like applicable for all the other websites on the web. So I will suggest you to go back to the other resources we have shared within the other presentations. We will also share those resources tomorrow in an email. And if you're specifically concerned with the usability of a specific website like GoDaddy, I would suggest you to refer to that one, because there are so many domain providers, and we are not expert on these ones.
Yeah. So some of the CMSs, content management systems, for example, are as simple as just
switching,
getting a little bit informed first, reading a couple of things on their support pages, on their help center, then going where you need to flip the switch, and then monitoring for the next few days or weeks that the transition is happening properly. And in those cases, well, it's just because that's the way that the technology you're using is set up. If you're using completely custom hosting for a very large website, with GoDaddy, with Bluehost, with OVH, with whatever hosting company, then it will depend on which technology you use behind it. Are you on an Apache server? Are you on, it's going to be a lot of knowledge of the actual hosting to be able to put in place the redirects. It doesn't work always in exactly the same way. The interfaces are different. So yeah, really referring to the documentation of each web hosting provider is probably the best course. Yeah. Walter had a question that I think you addressed already partially, which was, when does the new HTTPS go into effect, and how will it affect me? Especially the first part there. When does it affect? When is it happening?
I think when he's saying like new HTTPS, I think he was referring to the changes that we announced on Chrome regarding the deprecation of HTTP, right? So it is pretty much in effect. Yeah. So as of last September, Chrome has started marking all HTTP pages as not secure. So this is happening as we're speaking.
Yeah. Then affect me can mean so many things. So that question is not as precise. If it's affect me in search results, because it's still my HTTP pages that are being shown, then, it, as we said, it's a progressive process over several months, up to several months, sometimes faster, many times faster, actually. Don't want to
and sometimes people are confused with oh, I have this HTTP warning on Chrome, will this impact my SEO performance? Maybe we can clarify that one. They're totally separate, totally separate. So having that red warning doesn't impact your SEO performance. But again, as we have explained in the past, Google Search officially announced that we are taking HTTPS as a positive ranking signal. So you are actually missing out that part. And also, it's not very nice to your users to see that red warning. So yeah, you might be losing some of your users as well. So it's a good reminder.
One question which we could have included in the know before you go things before going into the migration was, I have Mohammed is asking us, I have a non-financial and mostly static website. It does contain comments. Should I move to HTTPS? So this comes from something we hear all the time, which is, why would I care about encryption and security of data? My users they can't log in, they can't enter any information on the site. It's just the website of my fly fishing Alaska blog, right? And therefore they're not at risk because they're not entering personal information. Well, imagine this. I'm a bad guy and I find a way to modify the content of Fatih's website between the moment it is requested to the server and the moment it arrives in the browser of a reader of your website, right? And on the About Me page, I add a block of code, which enables me to put in a PayPal donate button, right? So you say, hey, I'm Fatih, I go fly fishing, I do this, I do that. And then I, as a malicious actor, when people are on my Wi-Fi, when they go to your website, I also say, I take donations at PayPal, or I say PayPal, but it's really any payment solution.
It could be easily replaced.
Google Pay, whatever it is. And then I put my account there, a link to pay me in that account. So because of we want to ensure that information is not tampered with both ways, it doesn't matter if your users are entering information or not. You can also protect them by making sure that they see what you want them to see on your website.
And since it is specifically mentioned that the website has comments section, so I just would like focus on this part. Actually, comments are sensitive user informations as well, even though they're posted like online publicly. Any third party that is intercepting with the other user's computer can still read these comments. So think about it: you're visiting a health related or financial information related website, and you're actually putting like a personal question. If you're doing this over like HTTP network, you are actually putting that user at risk. Somebody with bad intentions can read those comments and associate it with like a certain individual.
Yeah.
So it is still like a private user information and should be treated as such.
All right. And we are 1 minute over time. There were other questions. Most of the questions, though, we'd covered in the frequently asked questions. We'd prepared this session properly. And well, yeah, we hope that you had a good time, that you learned a lot mostly, and that this session answered a lot of questions. There are many places where you can get support online still. So Google's Help Center, other technology providers' help centers can be helpful as well. We have webmaster forums. We have AdSense publishers forums where you can go ask questions. You'll have maybe Googlers or most likely other users that will help you with them and answer your questions that you have on these HTTPS migration topics. So make sure to use those solutions. They're usually very, very helpful, we've seen. Any last words?
That's it, right?
Famous last words?
So yeah, I mean, I also suggest that I always believe that the experiences from other people are very helpful. So try to see any case studies, any I know a lot of tech enthusiasts or website owners that are sharing their HTTPS migration stories online, and I find them very helpful. Just try to look into them as well. So they're covering a lot of small bits and pieces that we might not be covering as well. So just look at them and benefit.
All right. Thank you very much. And don't forget next month's AdSense on Air session, which, if I'm not mistaken, is on the ads.txt.
Yes.
And thank you very much and have a good day. Get the end of the day.
Thank you very much.